I'm ready.
Ready.
All right. Now you see there's all of these people here and I don't know who. I see everybody's face on, which is fantastic. But it also means I don't have my panelists right there. Okay. Anyway, excellent. So welcome everybody to the European Women in Mathematics panel discussion on gender balance in mathematics. I'm Eugenie Hunsaker. I'm a mathematician in the UK. And I'm also the chair of the Women in Diversity in Mathematics Committee for the London Mathematical Society. So I've had the opportunity to get involved in a lot of diversity activities in the UK, as well as more broadly. So I'm really delighted to have been invited to chair the panel today. And being the provocative individual I am, I've given an assignment. I've given assignments, I've given questions to the panelists, who I'm delighted to introduce. So I thought perhaps we could just start. These are the names. I have panelist introductions here, but I realized I could just have the names. Well, here are the names. Can people see people?
Yep.
Can they only see the screen?
We can see also people. Well, depends what kind of view.
Okay, yeah, brilliant. Okay, so that's great. So I'll keep this up here and perhaps we can just go in the order, alphabetical order here. So Shabnam, can you start off, introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Shabnam Beheshti. I'm now under a new title of the incoming Director of Education in the School of Mathematical Sciences at Queen Mary University of London. I'm a member of the Geometry and Analysis Group, and my research area is mathematical relativity. So thank you for having me.
Fantastic. And Claudia.
Hello, I am Claudia Kuttner. I am a mathematician working in algebraic graph theory. I am also director of the University of Primorska, which is the host institution for this 8th European Congress of Mathematics, and I am also involved in the organizing committee.
Fantastic, wonderful. And Volker.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm Volker Mehrmann, professor for numerical analysis at the Technical University of Berlin and currently president of the European Math Society.
Excellent. And Jill?
Hello, I'm Jill Pfeiffer. Thank you very much for this invitation. I'm a professor of mathematics at Brown University, where my primary field of research is harmonic analysis and PDE. I just finished a term as president of the American Mathematical Society, and I also serve currently as vice president for research at my university.
Wonderful. Great to have you. And finally, Carola.
Yeah, I'm Carola Schönlieb. I'm an applied mathematician from the University of Cambridge in the UK. I work on applied PDEs, inverse problems, mathematical imaging. And one other hat I should mention, or former hat I should mention, is that I was the convener of the European Women in Mathematics Society until September last year.
Excellent. Well, it's really fantastic to have all of you here, and I'm looking forward to hearing your perspectives on the questions, as well as we have a few questions, and then once we've gone through those, I'm going to open up to questions from the audience. Now, there is a possibility to put something in the questions. So what I was at a workshop just yesterday where, actually over the weekend, where it's often that people actually put comments in. If there's actually a question that you'd like people to answer rather than a comment that you're making, could you preface it with the letter Q, just capital letter Q, and then your question, so that I know it's really a question that you would like to have posed to the panelists. Okay, excellent. So I'm going to move on. So this is sort of just where are we in terms of gender equity in mathematics, gender balance in mathematics, where have we made progress over the past 10 years, and what, from your experience, are the biggest challenges that remain for us in the area of gender equity. So I'm gonna just go through always in this same order. for everybody. Okay, do you remember your order? Remember who comes right before you, right? You've got that memorized. You're good, panelists? Excellent. Okay, so Shabnam.
No pressure always answering every question first, but I suppose that gives me some cover to answer quickly to leave time for other panelists as well.
So you won't be repeating what other people have said, so.
So in this case, I know there are a number of people who are already aware of the landscape on the panel for UK. So what I did was I actually asked our departmental Athena Swan champion for some comments also to convey, because I thought she and I would have very different perspectives on this. For those of you who don't have such a structure set up in the United Kingdom, there's in many universities, they have a role called the Athena Swan champion, which is meant to be well, championing gender diversity. And in this case, we have somebody more broadly in equality and diversity committee. So they're keeping track of the kind of data we're creating and making sure that things like unconscious bias are minimized. So I think as an official response, so Sylvia, my colleague, said she believes the number of women in maths at senior levels are increasing, but at a much lower pace than one would hope. So challenges remain all around. I think I'd like to add some light and shade to that by saying that underrepresented groups are still under tremendous pressure to be visible and mentor others. And this can be in direct tension with the promotion and progression of those very same people within their departments, just because of the way we place value on certain criteria for getting promoted. So perhaps I offer that as one of the biggest challenges remaining, is that until there's a critical mass of people who can help feed the pipeline, there will always be pressure points on the people who are underrepresented. But I think one of the biggest pieces of progress I think I've seen in the UK, and again, I've only been in the UK for about 5 years, I think it's the idea that we are creating data with all the decisions we make, and that this data needs to be understood, it needs to be benchmarked by discipline, and there needs to just be a broader awareness of this as being of value. So while there are still those tensions, I think that increased awareness in the past 10 years has helped significantly in getting people on board with changes in policy at institution level. I think one of the biggest challenges remaining both in the UK and the US, having had experience in both, is that contract types make a very big difference in trajectory and the kind of support you receive as a researcher. And what I mean by that is if you're at an institution where your contract type is primarily teaching or primarily research, then you can get siloed away from each other as colleagues. And I don't think that serves individuals or departments very well. I think I should stop here and give people a chance to answer.
Hello, so I think that now it's my turn. So I'm from Slovenia, and in Slovenia, the current situation is as follows. If we look at the students for math study programs, it's actually balanced, between female and men on a bachelor level. Similarly on the master level, but then the situation a little bit changes on the PhD level in favor of men. The drastic change is if we look on the positions, how many females are in med departments. And for example, at our University of Primorska, 1/4 of department members are females. And at the other universities in Slovenia, this percentage is a little bit lower. If we look at full professorships, so in Slovenia, we have the so-called habilitation system. There are only 4 full professors, and I am glad that 2, so I'm one, because it's a condition to be a rector, to be a full professor, and another one is here with us today, and then there are 2 others. And 2 are at the University of Primorska, 2 are at the University of Ljubljana, and then we are having a 3rd public university that does not have a full professor in mathematics. So then the second question here is where over the past 10 years has there been a progress? So 3 full professors, female full professors were obtained in the last 10 years. So it's a big achievement. And also within the Math Society in Slovenia, it's a society of mathematics, physics, and astronomers. We established a committee for women, and this committee actually was really actively involved in the exhibition that was just presented in the session before we started. And so what is the biggest challenge? So the biggest challenge is that we actually have quite a few good mathematicians, female mathematicians that have research records such that they are owning a professors like assistant professor or associate professor titles, but they do not have salary as professors. They are still on the position of TA. And I think that we need to change this in the next year or so. This is for now.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's my turn. Let me take two hats in my answer here. One in the answer about Germany and one in the answer about the European Mathematical Society. So in Germany, the political situation, everything's set up so that gender balance should be improved drastically with a rapid increase. The rules in committees, the rules about inviting people, the rules about gender bias and how this is trained, they're all, I think, ideal. What has not improved very much are the numbers, at least the numbers on the professor level. And that's mainly due to the fact, that's my interpretation, I don't have statistical figures about that, that the number of applications is typically still very low. Female application to math departments very low, depends on the fields a little bit. And the second thing is that we in Germany have this terrible timeline in hiring. So the typical professorship hiring is between 35 and 45, and that's a very bad time for a permanent position hiring. So we don't have very many of the careers that can stay on a position, but you have to move. So there's a lot to be done. I think from the political side it has been done, but whether the universities and the hiring system will improve the situation, in particular the leaky pipeline, I'm not too optimistic about that it will go fast. And the biggest challenges, I would say, are really that if you make rules and you follow them strictly, then the difficulty is that the few women that are there are overburdened with committee work. And so in every committee, we have to have essentially 50% women. We have to invite 50% of the women. Some women are invited, and it's clear that they will not get it, but they have to be invited because of the strict rule. And it makes it difficult, but I don't have a solution for that. And concerning the European Mathematical Society, I would say we're on a good track. The executive committee now is 40% female, and we are having an explicit plan how to improve the female representation in editorial boards. We've discussed this with the Women in Math committee, and so in the next years, the journals that we are running, we will increase the number of female editors quite a lot. But let me just give you one bad situation. You look at this conference, you look at the number of prizes, you look at the number of invited speakers, and you look at the committees that have done a good job in the committees for the invited speakers. It has improved over the last years. In the prizes, it has not. And this is something where I don't have a clue how to improve that. The only situation I see is if we really make sure that in these committees, the organizing committee and in the prize committees, we have more women. But that will be another burden. So there's a catch here. Thanks.
Okay, I think I'm next. So I just want to start by saying that I think this is a really timely moment for a discussion of these issues. There's already a fair number of studies and research that shows that the effects of the pandemic is especially hard on women in science overall. In fact, a recent article in Nature tells us that submissions to arXiv by male authors increased during the pandemic, but not so for women. So I want to go a little bit farther back with some of the data from in the US to talk about progress and lack of it. And so maybe I'm going to start in 1971 with the founding of the Association for Women in Mathematics. So this was a professional society with a mission to support women in math. It was founded, I would say, in frustration with a lack of effort in the profession to actively support women, including from the largest math society, the American Math Society. So at some point in the 1970s, the American Math Society did, in fact, start to pay attention to the issue of underrepresentation of women, adopting language in regular reminders to its membership to work to actively support women in the profession. And over the years, women have become increasingly involved in leadership positions in the society. In 1977, 13% of math PhDs, doctoral degrees in the US, were awarded to women. And by 1993, that climbed to 28%. So real progress was made. And that percentage, has increased a bit, going a little bit above 30%, edging toward a third in the early 2000s in the US. And the latest data has that percentage now at 29%. So here we are, 30 years later, no change. And why is that? Well, we know that, work-life issues have a greater effect on women. The career timeline in the US from starting with your PhD is you're expected in about 7 years to reach a tenured or permanent position. And these are, of course, the same years in which women might be creating families as well as careers. And even the adoption of gender-neutral family leave practices in academia has, for certain disciplines, even been shown to privilege men. Dean Davis Blake in Michigan put it this way: giving birth is not a gender-neutral event. But a recent 2020 National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine report called Promising Practices for Addressing Underrepresentation of Women had a really sobering conclusion, which was that bias, discrimination, and harassment is a major driver of underrepresentation. So, it's really difficult, I think, for well-intentioned, caring people in our profession to face such a conclusion, but face it we must, or I fear that we'll make no further progress. And so I'll pass it on to the next panelist.
All right, so I think I'll do it similar to Volker, who wears a country and an association hat. So I work in the UK, and so I'll first answer with my UK hat on. I came to the UK about 10 years ago, formerly working in Austria and in Germany. And I would say at the time when I came here, things were, at least it felt like this, that things in Austria and Germany were much more active in women encouragement in mathematics area. There was much more a topic than when I arrived in the UK. So since then, a lot of things have changed, and there are lots of activities that have emerged. Athena Swan was mentioned. There are lots of, student societies which all of a sudden popped up like mushrooms in mathematics departments. Hiring also started to change to a certain extent in some universities where procedures were changed such that search committees were really actively looking and approaching candidates, female candidates they wanted to apply. So things have changed to a certain extent in terms of the activities and the awareness, but there is no equity yet, for sure not. And so there is still, I think, a long way to go. And in particular, I think, Claudia, you also mentioned this, on the higher, of course, you go up, the grimmer it looks, and that already starts on a PhD level. On a European level, so I said before, I was former convener of the European Women in Mathematics Association, and also Jill just mentioned the Association of Women in Mathematics that has been founded in the US. That these associations still exist, I think, is also a sign, and exist and are super active, as active as ever, maybe even, is also a sign that there is still a lot of work to do, and in particular the young female mathematicians, they are looking for networks for exchange of experiences and so on. So this is on a European level still very much a topic. And when Elena Resmerita and I, so Elena Resmerita was the deputy convener at the time when I was convener, when the two of us were active, we also tried to make a collection of country statistics for the man-women ratio. And again, it was a sobering exercise. Let's say it like this. So where over the past 10 years has there been progress? I think I mentioned some of these. Maybe I'll jump directly to the next question. So where are the biggest challenges remaining? And I'll try to be a bit complementary to what has been said already. I think, in my point of view, one of the biggest challenges that I've personally, and that I know many people have faced, and that is very much linked to many of the problems I think that we have been raising, is that there is no societal equity between men and women yet. And that has symptoms in family, home is not equally shared, is not considered as a joint effort between two parties in a couple. This is also linked to subjects such as mathematics being still, having still a gender link. These should be gender neutral. So for me, this is a topic that is very close to my heart. And maybe to say one thing that has improved also to a certain extent in the UK in the last years, linked to this challenge, is that in 2015, which for some countries seems to be very late, a shared parental leave system has been introduced, a genuinely shared system, which still has not been taken up as much as we want, but I think things like this are so important. And then the other one is really to making our work environment more inclusive, really give space and appreciate different characters, different personalities. People coming from different backgrounds have different ways to behave, to express themselves. And all of this is so important the higher you come up, because also, as Volker said, we are more and more committees, and so we have to give a voice to all of these people and listen to them. Yeah, I want to close with this. Thank you.
Great, thank you to, I can tell you did your homework, so that's really great. Thank you so much, all of you, for your insights. So I'm going to move on to the next question. So this sort of comes out of experience that I've had working in the UK on diversity, which is that you come to realize that there are changes, the changes that we need to address, the changes we need to make, the challenges that we face often take place at different levels, or there are behaviors or phenomena that are driven by policies at different levels. And so I was hoping that you could talk, each of you again, in terms of sort of in your country and your experience about at what level are interventions being proposed or made, where do they need to be proposed and made that they're not being made yet, in particular sort of thinking about things that an individual department or an institution could do versus things where we need some change in national policy, versus things that relate to international culture of mathematics. So again, Shabnam, you get to start off.
Thank you. I think I kind of choked on the last question, but I have done my homework, and here's where I took this question to be a call at arms. So I've listed a number of things which I think I will suggest, and I'll point out which ones people in the UK or departments in the UK are trying, and some which are basically things I wish somebody would try, and maybe you can consider it a buffet and ignore whatever you like. So I'm going to work my way from individuals up to national policy with sort of different interest points here. At the individual level, I think I agree with one of the previous panelists that this is exactly the right time for a conversation about intersectionality between issues that have to do with gender equity, also being at the interface of decolonizing curriculum, which I do feel that in some ways, perhaps as mathematicians, we feel like we can keep at arm's length, but I would propose that this can happen in a non-cynical way. I've had conversations with colleagues who are string theorists about this. They said, well, how am I supposed to do this? And I would propose that sometimes we try to be too straightforward about, or give a too literal of an interpretation as to what this means. Maybe quantum mechanics was primarily influenced by Bohr and Schrödinger, but there are a variety of people on this planet who use those ideas right now, and they don't look like you and me. And we just have to provide a set of, it doesn't have to be an exact match. It can be a set of dotted lines to the future so that our students can see themselves working on a living subject. So I would propose that it's actually not that hard to look at one's own teaching through that lens. And perhaps I'm saying this with my director of education hat on. And again, it can be as simple as it being a cultural reference. I arrived in the UK and inherited a set of notes which had a lot of cricket examples. And I can assure you, they did not go down well because I didn't know the rules. And frankly, nor did a good portion of my students. So we scrapped those and scrapped all the ones about Wimbledon, and we did something that felt less like a rich man's sport, and suddenly everybody got engaged in a different way. Again, that's not necessarily gender specific, but it could be. So those are things that I would suggest at the individual level we could all do, and it takes us almost no effort to do. It's a matter of not being cynical about where the push for doing it is coming from. At the departmental level, or at the School of Mathematics level, I think one of the things our department has done a very good job on, and I've seen in other UK universities, is accommodating family responsibilities, because many universities now with the online teaching have increased the number of working hours. So being aware of and sensitive to the constraints that people have, irrespective of whether or not they have children, but especially in the case of asking, do you have constraints, and not have to ask somebody about their personal circumstances or in order for them to feel comfortable to share some level of constraints to work around, I think has worked quite well for us. I think people who are in positions of decision-making at school level should be aware of the administrative allocations they're making based on maybe gender perceptions, which are still rampant, I think, in many departments where many women are put in more pastoral roles, which then in turn are not valued as highly in a promotion application. So that's something that one can just say, am I doing this? Is there something that have I created the data on this just by the decisions I think I'm making fairly? So those are at the department level. At the institution level, I would say ring fencing funding for certain circumstances, like giving money. So for example, in our physics department and a few others from the Institute of Physics at the national level, there was a suggestion that departments ring fence money for postdocs to come in during the time to help researchers who have labs keep their research ticking over. While that may not be directly relevant for mathematicians in that form, the idea of ring fencing funding to help people sort of reestablish their research career after a particular gap, I think is a sound one. I think where we have room at the institutional level to not have as much of a resource grab would be to address the two-body problem. I think that still sort of hides in the shadows, and it does affect a lot of people. So in that vein, what has happened here in the UK, learned societies have played a big role in helping to address that. For instance, the London Mathematical Society specifically has funding available for people who are coming to the UK due to relocation for any number of personal reasons as opposed to professional ones. It is a professional foot in the door to change countries. And I think it doesn't have to be a large amount, but it has to give you some wings or some bravery to make that decision. And I'm personally a recipient of that grant, and I know that it certainly helped me to get a foothold and understand the work environment in the UK much better than when I was in North America applying for posts in the UK. I think the learned societies also have a big role to play in advocacy, and again, providing accurate data for policymaking at national level. If we look at all of STEM and then you bunch math together, then you're not going to have the appropriate benchmarking for the targets that governments may wish to meet in reasonable amounts of time. So in this case, I think there are some ideas of policy at national level or at institutional level on progression and promotion, which should follow suit by actually relying on information being given by the learned societies. In this case, also Association for Women in Maths and London Mathematical Society. Again, I think joining these societies should be an expectation so that we can see what's happening in the broader community besides our schools. I think I should stop here.
It's my turn. I think that the only possible way forward is to follow the path through individual departments. I am an example why I reached the position of being a rector, because the Math department at our university supported me, at first to the dean's level and then to the rector's level. And I would like that also other Math departments in Slovenia would follow our department, Math department at our university. And why I'm convinced that this is the only possible way is because I'm very actively involved in making national policies. And for example, I am in a committee for national scientific awards, and we have an act for these scientific awards where it is written that the committee should select a balanced awardees between females and men, but we are not able to do that. Why? Because we don't get enough candidates. So colleagues, department members are not suggesting their female department members to be awarded these national scientific awards. And so I think that must be bottom up. It's the right approach. And also we are currently in preparation of new act for research and innovation in Slovenia. And in this act, we are having several committees on a national level. And in the law, it is in this law that it is so Act of Research and Innovation, for every of this committee is written that it must be balanced. And so I think that the situation in Slovenia will change on the national level, but at first, departments need to recognize female researchers to suggest them for these national positions. This is this.
Yeah, let me go similar in a similar way like Shabnam. So on the individual level, I think we have to give stronger support on the lower level in the leaky pipeline to get people that can be done on the departmental level and also on the university level, to give young women the chance to pursue their careers in a better way than as it is currently the case. Because the leaky pipeline, I think, is one of the biggest problems. And so if we help in supporting female PhD level people to get a stronger performance when they apply for positions, to support them with extra grants so that they can go to research trips, etc. So we're trying this, and I think this has a positive effect. This is in the state of Berlin, which is one of the states of Germany, which is very progressive in many respects. It's not so in other states. On the other thing, which I think had a very positive effect, is that the budget that the university gets has certain little budget parts, and one of the budget parts, accounting for about 9% of the budget that a university gets, is whether you meet the average female level of all subjects. Now, what does that mean? That means if you get extra money in the department from the budget from the state, for the budget from the state, if you meet the gender balance quota, which is an incentive for departments to look into hiring and universities to look into hiring women. But it has also a counter effect. The counter effect is that those universities which have primarily humanities move forward better than universities like technical universities, which have predominantly science and engineering subjects. So again, it's a difficult way to use such incentives, but I think one can achieve something. And personally, I think we also have to do something which is discussed very much, but not pursued too much, is we have to start on the high school level to improve the situation for girls in science and mathematics, in STEM subjects. And we are particularly proceeding with so-called Girls' Days, and that is, I know that it's done in many other places. But I think for a technical university, this is absolutely essential that we get more girls interested in science and mathematics. And we have to do something here. We can't just let it go, because then we will not improve. Thank you.
So yeah, I agree with everything that's been said, and so many great ideas and reports here. I do want to focus a little bit on challenging the stereotypical assumptions about mathematics careers and mathematicians. I think that is, that there's just a lot of studies and research that shows that this is a barrier. This is what keeps young women out of STEM fields and out of mathematics. So the perception of that women are not as gifted or talented in math, and that this is what it takes to succeed, is very hard to overcome. We know also from lots of studies that role models matter. But it's a sort of problem that feeds upon itself, because then we end up calling upon and overusing the women that are in leadership positions or visible to be these role models, and that then hurts their careers. I think that I'd have to go back to something that Claudia was talking about, which is, what we can do on a departmental level and a local level, because truly the experience of each individual in their mathematics profession is a local one, as well as one of national policy and global culture. And like Claudia, I have been very supported by my department for leadership roles within my department and university, as chair of my department, as the director of a math institute, ICERM, that's here at Brown University, and that experience of being supported and is truly great, phenomenally important, I think, for every individual. As far as strategies that work in on a more policy level, I think that first of all, we need committed leadership, right? We need leadership to acknowledge the importance of gender underrepresentation and the importance of addressing the problem, reminders to think about this and to do what you can locally. We need resources that are actually addressed, that are going to be allocated to address equity issues. This includes resources for recruitment, for teaching, for training, for creating transparencies, for collecting data demographic data so that we can learn from it. And training in unconscious bias, recognizing gendered language, reading letters of recommendation with an eye toward recognizing gendered language. All of these things involve attention and training. And we, mathematicians, like every academic, needs help and reminding that this is necessary, this is important, and they need support to do this. So this is sort of where the sort of global picture of this comes in, but local interventions, I think, are key here. Thank you.
Yeah, so I also agree with everything that has been said, and I thought I'll just focus on one thing that has been mentioned before already, which is prize nominations or prizes going to women. So, as I think both Claudia and Volker mentioned, you can't give a prize to a woman if they are not nominated. And so it is extremely crucial to work on increasing the number of nominations of female mathematicians for both national, European, international prizes. And so depending on which of those we are targeting, different societies need to be and indeed have been active. So within the UK, I don't want to embarrass you, Eugenie, but the Women in Mathematics London Mathematical Society has been very much aware of this and has really improved things over the last years. On a European level, I do know that both the EWM, the European Women in Mathematics Association, and the Women in Math Committee of the EMS are working very hard to improve the situation and to encourage nominations of strong female mathematicians. And so all of these, and I know that, for instance, also Jill, I think this is true, the AWM has actually a prize committee as a sub-working group who is doing similar things. So I think this is very important, and we need to put effort into this. And I don't think I want to say more because a lot has been already mentioned. Thank you.
Sorry, Shabnam, go ahead.
Eugenie, sorry, I'm going to open up my mute and remember to lower my hand, which is the thing I always forget to do during these meetings. Can I just play devil's advocate here for a moment? Because while I have prepared answers for the other questions, there's something that's kind of, I would like to know what the other panelists think about the following sort of collection of thoughts that are coming out of this. So panelists has mentioned that bias, discrimination, and harassment is a major driver for underrepresentation, right? And then on top of this, we're saying that, well, there need to be local actions that are made. And to my mind, there's something that's sitting in the middle of this, which is the recruitment of people into the pipeline. And then once they are perhaps, let us say, successful enough to get a permanent post, whatever the word success means here, which I think is already questionable the way I'm using it. Let's suppose from high school up to being a postdoc, you're in transit in the math world. And then at some point you get a lectureship and you're becoming sort of more settled into whatever the more permanent academic life is. I would argue that the mentorship hammer is starting to make everything look like a nail. And I'm finding it a little bit frustrating that mentorship is what we throw at everything that has to do with gender imbalance. Like right now I'm permanent. Someone's like, you need a mentor to do X. And it's like, no, I don't need a mentor. What I need is an advocate who's in that room when people are making decisions to stand up for the quality of my work. I don't need to be mentored on how I can assert myself better, obviously, as you can tell. But I mean, I say that in jest, but what I really mean is that there seems to be this very blunt tool that we're using for a very sharp problem. And my sense is that mentorship has its time and place. And I wonder whether there's something that goes from individual practice to policy once you start speaking about people who are now in place who don't progress to professorships and don't get to that other level. I mean, is that something that I'm speaking emotionally, but there's certainly data that backs this up. And I just wonder whether any of the other panelists would care to comment on this view I have or have observed.
I'll go ahead and, because now that you've taken the role of chair, I can take a short panelist role. That you're right, Shabnam, that there actually is, there are reports that are coming out now that are focusing on mid-career as a place that there's really an issue. And if you think about this, when you look at the pipeline, for instance, in the UK, the pipeline for women in mathematics is roughly 23% from PhD through positions, academic positions, up to professor, and then it plummets down to 12. So there's something that, there's that issue of getting from that sort of mid-career to the next stage up. One of the things that I think is related to that, and that's why I've asked about it in the next question, is grant funding and the way that grant funding is allocated. But yeah, so I think that there's also a tendency that, Volker was talking about the importance of people early in the pipeline, and absolutely, we have to keep a focus on people early in the pipeline. But I think sometimes it's felt, as a mid-career woman, I felt like society, that mathematics is saying, well, we screwed up with those guys, let's forget them and we'll just try to get it right the next time, and I feel like that's something that's been happening over and over and over for years and years, that we think, oh well, we're going to do it right this time, and we're always sort of thinking, how are we going to do it right from new, rather than thinking, how are we going to help people who have struggled because of things that have happened before. And so I think you're absolutely right, Shabnam, that mid-career is an area that really needs focus, and that hasn't gotten as much focus in the past. And now I'm going to hope that other people have clever things to say. Oh, sorry, other than my dog was not the one I was hoping would have something clever to say. Volker.
Yeah, I think one has to distinguish a little bit between different countries. So in the UK, I think the system is different than in many countries in Europe, because essentially for example, in Germany, you cannot be promoted on the position to a higher level. You have to move. And this is changing slightly with junior professors, but essentially you have to move. And that is a bad thing for mid-career women, in particular with children, because they tend not to want to move. And I can perfectly understand this. So that's one point. But the other point, I fully agree with you with the advocates. Being in committees all the time, I see that people advocate their own students, their own field, and I don't see very much advocacy for young women in other fields or in other directions. So, I mean, let me not get frustrated about it, but it's really the case that you see in committees all the time. And you can be lucky if you have enough nominations, like Carola said, and even better if you are able to get 1, 2, or 3 EMS prizes to women. And so I really don't know what to do about it, but I think it can only be an appeal to the community. Forget about that number theory is first, or numerical analysis, or topology. And look, here's a wonderful young woman in algebraic topology. And yes, she should get it, rather than the 15th in your own field.
I see that we've had so many fantastic contributions already. We're starting to run out of time. So Jill, maybe just really quickly, but I would like to move on to our next question and hope to at least do a sort of lightning round, as they do on British comedy shows, do a lightning round for the next question. But Jill, just very quickly first.
Okay, very quickly. I couldn't agree more that there are policy issues, that it's not just a matter of mentorship to make a difference. And you know, so someone, I forget, maybe it was Carola, mentioned the American Math Society's Prize Oversight Committee. This was a committee created to create, to help diversify the nominations, to increase the nominations, for prizes for AMS, to look at our processes and make recommendations that would create a more diverse group of prize winners. And I think that you don't, there are probably, there are undoubtedly problems embedded in processes that we don't see when we don't, take a sort of data-driven look at it. And I think it's very important to look at all processes, not processes toward prizes, processes toward hiring, process toward recruitment, and look at these through a lens of who might we be leaving out. And so, yes, it's definitely more than mentorship. Thank you for that comment.
Okay, so the next question, as I said, is about grants. So again, Volker, you're absolutely right. This is going to depend enormously on the country and on the policies within the funding agencies. But there is a lot of literature now that's been looking at something called the Matthew effect, whereby funding tends to accrue to individuals who have had early and continuous funding success. So if you've not had early success in funding, it's very difficult at mid-career then to get into funded, to get funding. And funding is really critical, both of course for being able to undertake the work you want to do, but also for getting the recognition. And this has been seen to particularly disadvantage women. So I'm just wondering what thoughts people have on how we can start to tackle this problem. Well, I've said in Europe because this is the European Congress, but Jill, I'm happy to hear about the American perspective as well. So lightning round, 1 minute each.
Okay, I'm going to be very quick about this. There's certainly the idea of success begets success. I've even used that phrase in a grant proposal to leverage additional funding for add-on activities. So I think that it's something that's in sort of the mind's eye. I would propose that funding agencies, instead of sort of amassing large amounts of funding for individuals who then are supposedly supposed to become the leaders in the field, perhaps allow more people to have their research take over while doing the things that they do to keep the mathematical community alive. I'd be very curious to see what kind of uptake you get in terms of gender balance if we actually didn't have, £500,000 grants, but split it up into 4 and ask for smaller grants. I'm going to stop to give other people a chance.
I am very familiar with the concrete implications of Matthew effect, as it took me quite a while before I was successful in obtaining funding for a research project at the Slovenian Research Agency, and I got it 3 years ago, and actually was the first math research project led by a female. And so at the end, the satisfaction was even greater, since I knew that I succeed in a somewhat unfriendly environment. And for Europe, I think that it will change because, as you probably know, every institution that wants to apply for EU grants needs to prepare an action plan about balance, equal opportunities, gender balance, equal opportunities, etc. And so we are somehow forced to consider this problem on the institutional level. And this is a requirement in order to be able to apply for EU grant.
Thanks, Claudia.
Yeah.
Go for
I have a
Volker.
suggestion. We have an interview with the president of the ERC this week, who is a mathematician. And the ERC is a wonderful example where the Matthew effect is, so the money is going to the strongest individuals and only to those. Is the policy of the ERC. And I see the colleague from ERC here at the panel. She can maybe also mention something, but on the national level, I think it's very similar in most countries. But this has nothing to do with the fact that it's a gender unbalance. It's an unbalance towards, we say in Germany is that the devil always shits on the biggest pile. This is the statement, and it describes the situation very well.
So something that we're starting to consider in the UK is that we as mathematicians are the ones who are undertaking the reviews that result in the funding outcomes that we see. So another question is there a way that we as a community can start to think differently about the way that we undertake review that is still in keeping with the requirements of the agencies? Jill, you look like you're about to say something. I'm really hoping you're going to have something brilliant.
Well, there's a challenge. Well, I wanted to say that in the US, the majority of funding for mathematics comes from the National Science Foundation. And within the National Science Foundation, the Division of Mathematical Sciences competes in a sense for its share of funding with other big science. And so the pressure to fund large and new initiatives and put big money in places is tremendous. The Division of Mathematical Sciences has a significant part of its budget that funds now 6 or 7 mathematics institutes in the country. And through mathematics institutes, it is possible to create opportunity and disperse awards to many, many mathematicians, bringing them to programs, to conferences, to workshops. And so I think that the Institute program within the Division of Math Sciences has been a remarkably successful one, especially since they started expanding the number of them in 1999. I think there were 3, and now there's more than twice that. The Simons Foundation is one example of a foundation or a philanthropy where many smaller awards to mathematicians are possible through grants that amount to $5,000 or $10,000 a year for mathematicians that have don't have other sources of funding, just to go to travel, to go to conferences, to bring visitors, whatever whatever their research needs. That's been an extraordinarily successful and creative program. I think it's very challenging for our national funding agencies to go that route. So we're fortunate to have a foundation that's filled that gap, taken up the slack. As far as peer review, I think that in every situation, even where it may seem impossible or unlikely to succeed, we should really consider blind review, double blind, or what is it? It's doubly uncovered, not doubly anonymous review, sorry. So I think we should, and I hear this, and I say this not just for review of grants, but even for peer review of articles. And the argument against this that I hear in mathematics so much is that, well, people put everything on the archive. If we're a reviewer, we know who this is. We can't read a grant proposal and not know who this person is within a few pages. And to that, I would just say that if your first impression is the mathematics, not the individual and not where they're from, it's going to create a different place to start. And even if 5 pages in who this person is, still you've started in a different place. And so I would be an advocate for anonymous review, doubly anonymous review.
Thanks, Jill. Can I just ask Vita? I noticed that we're already over. Are we going to get kicked off this?
No,
I don't know.
no, you're not going to be kicked off, so you can continue with your debate. So no problem here.
Okay, well, I think because it's 8 o'clock and because we've had people promise to be on the panel, that if there's anybody from the panel, of course, participants can come and go as they like. If there's anybody from the panel who needs to go at this point, please, let us know and we'll thank you and you can move on, because I don't want you to feel any pressure to give yet more of your precious time, especially as we're trying not to overburden the very people that we're trying to support.
Yeah, so I'll take this as an opportunity, Eugenie. I'm happy to say I have a dinner appointment with a friend of mine, and so I can make one 1 minute comment about the Matthew effect.
Fantastic.
And then I'll
say goodbye and thank you.
I'll say goodbye. So I might just finish saying something a little bit controversial, maybe a little bit different to what everyone else said. But in a way, the Matthew effect is not something that is only reserved for academia. It's something that we experience in all aspects of life and in all professions, right? I mean, when you are looking for a builder who is refurbishing your bathroom, you will be looking at other bathrooms that this builder has been doing. You will be looking at how, what's the track record of this person. And this is true for a lot of places. So in a way, to a certain extent, this is fair enough, right? Your track record will say something about how successfully you have been running research projects in the past. So now I appreciate that there are various, conditions of life and various different career paths that people have been doing and so on. And so in certain situations, there are there is the situation that that you don't have this, and you start a little bit later, and I appreciate that. But maybe one way to go about that is to, for instance, think about giving space in a proposal where you could talk about these mitigating circumstances in some ways, just to really give them, you know, to discuss them and to say, look, this is where I am and this is why I am where I am. And so you shouldn't be looking at my track record in the same view than you're looking at another person's track record. I don't know. Also, lots of other things are good, which people said, double blind and so on. But in a way, right, if it's really about funding, this is connected. This is not just connected to the research that someone was proposing, but it is also connected to the person. So in a way, this has to be taken into account. So maybe, you know, really talking about this in a proposal is a good way to go about it. I don't know. That's my finish. Thank you.
Enjoy your dinner, Carola.
Thank you very much. Good to see everyone. Really good discussion.
Excellent. Okay, so the last, sorry, were there any more comments on the Matthew effect? I think it's not fair for me to comment after Carola has left, but I just would point out a paper that that came out, and I don't have. It's called the Matthew Effect in Science Funding, which has looked at the issue of people who were ranked very close in initial funding, in funding earlier in their careers, ranked very close, but one just above and one just below the funding line. And that what you can see is that having gotten that grant creates a gap in their careers where they actually started out very close. So I think that the issue with the Matthew effect, of course, yes, we do need to take account of people's ability to deliver the research they've proposed. But because of the nature that what is fundable, the line of what is fundable is usually far below the line of what gets funded, that we end up running into problems with the Matthew effect. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that. Yeah, so the Matthew effect in science funding, it's a really good paper to take a look at. All right, so the final one is really a culture question, and I'm putting the heat on now on the panelists. And this is really similar to some of the things that Jill brought up about the mathematical, you know, what are careers supposed to be like. So this is a quote from the book by Margaret Murray, Women Becoming Mathematicians. And I'll read it out, but you can read along. So the myth is that mathematical talent and creative potential emerge very early in childhood. These natural gifts are focused and directed towards mathematics at this early age. In university, that the subject of study will be mathematics is a foregone conclusion, and the student proceeds from university to an elite graduate school without a break. In graduate school, the student comes under the tutelage of a powerful mentor, under whose direction he writes a doctoral dissertation that makes a significant contribution to his area of study. The mathematician is extraordinarily productive in research from his late teens to his early 40s, and during this period does his best work. There are no interruptions during these years of scholarly productivity. And her claim is that to a large extent, mathematicians' careers are judged against an ideal that is an ideal based on the experiences of married men with wives working at home that was common in the second half of the last century. And so my first question is a very pointed one, and I'm curious for each of you, to what extent has your career followed this trajectory? And then also, to what extent is such a trajectory necessary to achieve a position of eminence in the mathematical community? So Shabnam.
I am acutely aware of the position of eminence that the other panelists have. And I'm going to go ahead and bear all in hopes that this will allow the, I guess, the invisible audience to be brave as well and perhaps volunteer themselves for a panel at a future date. So my answer to the first one is, to what extent has your career followed this trajectory? It has not in any way, shape, or form. I didn't even want to become a mathematician when I went into the bachelor's, because I was sure I needed to get a double degree in math and mathematics and physics in order to become a physicist. But now here's the important thing. It's definitely not, but on paper, I can make it look like a yes. And I think that has shaped being able to successfully navigate through the next sets of career stages. I'm not saying I suffer from any imposter syndrome. I'm just saying I can look at that idealized trajectory and I can write my CV so it looks like I've gone from success to success without ever having admitted that my first postdoc was a place I applied to on a bet, which only makes a good story because I'm still here. You know, I reflected pretty hard on this question, actually, when Eugenie posted it to us. I came to the realization now, in the comfort of a permanent position, which perhaps some of our audience members may or may not be, if you're a postdoc wondering what the hell you're doing with your life. I came to the realization that the farther away my trajectory moved from the, quote, standard one, the harder I had to fight to retain my identity as a mathematician. It wasn't that I had to retain, it wasn't that I had difficulty retaining being a mathematician. It was somehow staking my own claim on what my identity as a mathematician looked like. And by standard, what I mean is, for up through my PhD and my postdoc, I was behaving largely like all of my other bachelor colleagues, and that was fine. And I think the main point where this trajectory changes, whether you're male or female, is when you start to have another human that you take into consideration. Now there's a 2-body problem, maybe there's a 3-body problem, maybe there are small people problems. But I never considered myself to be on a different trajectory than my colleagues. I just found that being successful at the standard milestones became harder and harder. I don't really know what to make of that, but that's the fact of the situation for me. And then at some point you're deemed too old to apply for grant X or Y, and you just look for other ones because you want to keep doing math. That's just how it is. And you sort of accept it until someone asks you to sit on a women in maths committee or panel and you look at data and you get a little bit angry. But I do think that this trajectory, I know very few people, male and female in my department, who followed this trajectory at all. And they're all the more interesting for it. It's why I like the department I'm in fact. I like all the shapes and sizes, and I think they do too, which is why it's important to find a good fit with the group you want to work with. So what I'd like to do is offer a call to action. Don't save your colloquia for the famous people. They get enough talk invites. Punt and ask a woman postdoc to be your colloquium speaker next month, and the month after, and the month after that. And I bet you they're going to give better talks than some of the people who walk in and give you the canned talks that they'd already prepared for 6 conferences in the week before. And that's how you can start getting visibility to get to those positions of eminence. I'm not saying that does it, but it certainly helps give you some face time, right? I had somebody invite me not knowing who I was. I gave a talk and the other people said, "How did you know this one?" And his answer, he was the head of the group, he's like, "I didn't. I just thought I'd want to find out what she had to say." And I've been interacting with that professor in Boston for about 20 years now. It was the first colloquium I ever gave. So, you know, your advocates can come from weird and wild places, and you might be somebody's advocate just by taking that chance. It's not a chance. I guess that's what I would say. So this is a myth for men and women alike, but you can use this as leverage to give women a little bit of a chance in a place that, you know, costs us nothing to do. Maybe that's enough for me.
Okay, so it's my turn. My mathematical career has not followed the standard path as well. First of all, even though I have enjoyed solving mathematical problems from my early age on, I was also interested in other subjects in school. And then I went to get a degree in mathematics and physics at the Faculty of Education at the University of Ljubljana. I wanted elementary school teacher. But then it turned out, however, that one of my professors offered me a teaching assistant position. And from then it just started happening. First international conference in China, my first paper, Fulbright scholarship, etc. And now I'm a full professor in mathematics at our university. I don't want to be too long because we are way over time. So this is this for this question.
Yeah, just let me be a little provocative. I've not followed this career, but I'm a man and I'm an applied mathematician, and I'm not a gold medalist of the Math Olympics, and I have not been in the career hotspot driving seat where many colleagues that you see here that win the prizes are. So maybe we should get rid of the Olympics. Maybe we should get rid of the prizes altogether. In order to avoid that, exactly this career hotspot, straight on career is still driving what we are doing. It's a provocation, but
I'm fully in favor of being provoking. So yeah, good question. How could we break this? So I mean, this is a question about the culture, right? How do we change the culture, the cultural expectation? And so it sounds like, you know, what you've sort of implied, Volker, is that it may not be necessary to become a mathematician to follow this, but to become a prize winner of eminence, it seems that many of them have, right? And so that also suggests, you know, if you're looking for people to nominate for prizes and the expectation is that the people you nominate will have followed this, you know, that it's a very gendered expectation of a life course. And so
Indeed.
Perhaps we need to rethink the way also, what is it that we're looking for in prizes? Anyway, Jill.
So my career has and has not followed this trajectory. When I started the university, when I started college, I didn't think I was going to be a math major. I wasn't on a math track. I was interested in many subjects, you know, different things. I went to a university that had a really great music school because I was very interested in music at the time. But this was, of course, well before the years of, watch this 5-year-old play Beethoven on YouTube. So I had some things to learn in that first semester. Anyway, I ended up taking a random selection of classes, things that I did not know anything about when I was in my first year of college. And one of these was set theory and logic, a course that was well over my head, but it was the course that ignited my passion for mathematics. And so that is how I became a mathematician. So almost by accident, maybe I had taken something else that would also have, ignited a passion, I would be doing something different. So I think that this notion that we're that mathematicians are somehow born to do this, or must be on a track at a very early age, keeps a lot of people out of the profession. I could point to lots of famous, and well-known, successful people that have not been on this trajectory. I was just at a reception of the American Math Society for the Joan Berman Fellowship for women in mid-career, and that she and her husband have endowed at the AMS. Joan Berman got her bachelor's degree in 1948. And she got her PhD in 1968. Okay, so there's a different trajectory, and an amazing mathematician to boot. So we really do have to do something about this cultural concept, this construct that there is a single path to success in mathematics.
Excellent. Well, I tell you, we're at the end of these questions, and I'm wanted to give some time, even though we're very, very over time, some chance for the questions from the audience. And I see, in fact, that there's one already, that Maria Gonzalez has her hand up. So Maria, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah. It's actually not a question, but a comment, because Boyker asked something in the middle of the discussion. You know, I happen to be a woman mathematician, but I actually went out of research and happened to end up working for the ERC. So I know Boyker very well. I've been working for 7 years as a scientific officer, and I took up the panel coordination a couple of years ago, or yeah, a year and a half ago. So I wanted to say that, you know, when you observe from the outside, because now I'm an observer, right? And I see all the community, women, men, women, applied, stats, pure. And I actually think that culture is the biggest thing you have to fight against, because there are certain beliefs on what pure mathematicians do, what applied mathematicians do, what statisticians do. And sometimes you, the mathematics community as a whole, you forget that you're a single community that should be working together rather than fighting apart, right? So that's what I think, is that it is actually some of the things that you mentioned are inbuilt in the community on these trajectories that you're saying. Whether somebody is a speaker here or there, or publishes a paper here or there, it gives you a different status. So this is something that is inbuilt in the community, and I think it should be kind of a joint effort to fight against this. The same, and I have to say that actually. If you see, there has been an increase on the percentage of female panel members in the panels, and in the last 2-3 years I see more discussions or more voicing things like unconscious biases or these different ways of evaluating excellence in the different communities. These things are voiced more and more, and the more you voice these things, the more the community is aware of these things are there, but I didn't realize. So I think it's a good sign. So as I say to Boyker, I do believe on working from the inside. So in the ERC, for example, this Matthew effect that you say, is the panel who decides on the funding. So if you think there is such a thing, it's because there is such a thing in the community. It's not that the ERC doesn't decide anything. The ERC gives you the proposals, and it's the panel who decides. So maybe there is this unconscious thing in the community. So that's what I see from the outside. But I also believe that there is a joint effort to work and to spot these things, to voice them, and to work towards improving them. So I can tell you that in the ERC, now we started with briefing of new panel members. We do talk about unconscious biases. We do tell, I follow an unconscious bias training, of course, and then you work on to make sure that the panel members realize it is a common responsibility, that we spot the things and we are aware of these things. So I'm overly optimistic, but I think that if we start from you mathematicians who are the ones that select proposals, and you change your minds and you forget about your biases and you forget about this community or this community or this community, then things may change, and people may maybe start applying from other communities, from more female applicants, which is also another issue. And the more you get in, the more you can change, right? So
I'm going to pause you quickly because Jill has to go, and I want to thank Jill for participating. So
that's
Jill,
fine, I'm done.
It was really great to have you on the panel. So thanks very much.
Oh, thank you. I was just writing a little thank you in the chat to say I had to run, and thank you for the opportunity, because it was really my pleasure. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Maria, these are exactly what you're bringing up, are exactly the questions that within the UK, we're planning a workshop in November, thinking in the community about these issues of taking responsibility as a community for the way that grants come out. So I wonder if you might be interested in coming along. So
oh, sure.
Yeah, if you can just privately in the chat send me your email address, then I'll send you an invitation,
no problem.
because it would be great to hear also the ERC side, because I think we hear the same comments from the EPSRC mathematics panel, that they can only set so much, but it's actually the people who are reviewing and sitting on panels who are making the decisions. So we need to think within, but I think that there's also a lot of confusion over how much we as a community are allowed to change the way in which we do reviewing. right? There's a way we've always done it. We know it's sort of, we know that that's okay because it's the way it's been done. And when you think, okay, so if we think about doing it in a different way, is that okay? Is that something that we're allowed to do? Are these decisions that we as reviewers or as panel members are allowed to make? Because there are also policies about the agency. So I think there needs to be this discussion between agencies and the community about, you know, to what extent do we in the community get to shape the way in which the policies of the funding agencies are enacted? So I think that's a really important question. So Volker, I don't know whether you would like to come along to that meeting as well. If you would, then drop me an email.
It would depend. As you can imagine, my schedule has been filled.
Of course it has. All right. Well, as I said, we can let you know when it's going to be. But yeah, it would be tremendous, Maria, to have you there. Are there other questions? I don't see any others. I don't see any open questions in the chat. And I noticed that we're losing participants, although we still have a fair number. Are there other questions that people would like to ask?